Welcome to Resistance Live. Since 2017, Resistance Live has been the go-to home for political and legal news and analysis through a decidedly progressive activist lens. I'm your host, Elizabeth Cronise McLaughlin. I'm a former Wall Street and human rights lawyer, a lifelong organizer, and a leadership and impact consultant for all those seeking to lead big progressive change in these incredibly challenging times. To get bonus broadcasts, ask questions, and more, don't forget to become a paid subscriber to the show at patreon.com/resistancelive. And to learn more about what we do to help progressive leaders everywhere, check out GaiaLeadershipProject.com. And now, here's today's show. Hey, everybody. Well, yesterday we had a fairly good news day on the show. We have one bit of very actually significant good news this morning that just broke within the last half an hour, which is that Kilmar Abrego Garcia has been ordered to be immediately released from ICE custody. I was just reviewing the order from the judge because there was an order ordering his release, and then there was a memorandum opinion supporting that. And it is a stunning rebuke of the conduct of the DOJ lawyers in trying to keep Kilmar Abrego Garcia in custody. In particular, excuse me, the judge reads the DOJ lawyers the absolute riot act about these fraudulent claims that they made that Costa Rica would not take Kilmar Abrego Garcia in a deportation, that he should be sent to Liberia instead, and essentially takes apart the DOJ's case like bit by bit. So the long and the short of it is that Kilmar Abrego Garcia must be released from ICE custody immediately. The DOJ has to notify the judge's chambers by 5 p.m. today that the release has been effected. They have to tell his attorneys in advance of his release where he will be released, and he will be free to walk around the United States and see his family and be with his children while the ongoing criminal case against him is pending. Now, I do want to remind everybody that this trumped up criminal case that was brought against him concerning this traffic stop a number of years ago has also been in very hot water. In fact, in recent days, the judge in that case has ordered the DOJ to produce additional evidence that they claim supports their case because the evidence against him is so weak. So again, this is very good news. This has been an unbelievable saga. The Judge Zinnes, noted at the beginning of her opinion how extraordinary and shocking the trajectory of the persecution of this man who has been in the United States on protected status since 2019 has been. And the fact that he has lived and worked and raised a family in Maryland since the time that he was granted protected release. He has been in this country since he was 16 years old when he fled El Salvador due to persecution by a notorious gang. He had previously been granted protected status as a result of that. So this is very welcome news at this point. And, you know, as I've been saying here over and over and over again, we have to take our wins where we can get them. Again, I have to remind you all, there are chips being made at the foundation of what the Trump regime is trying to do right now. This is another one. The reason why they have been so locked in on trying to deport this man, notwithstanding that he had already been sent to CCOT, and you will remember, even though there was no basis for him to be removed from this country, is because if they admit that they messed this one up, if they get held to account for messing this one up, then all of their other arrests come into question. And I think that's obvious, but it's particularly obvious in this instance. The other thing, of course, is that Kilmar Abrego Garcia, like many of the men who were detained for over 4 months at CCOT, experienced torture. Many of them experienced sexual assault. They do not want, those men have now been returned, by the way, to their home countries. They do not want men who have been detained at CCOT speaking out because crimes against humanity and human rights violations were perpetrated against them there. So in any event, the DOJ has lost this one and they have lost big. They have to release him immediately. That is literally the word that is used in the order. It's not like they even have until 5 p.m. today to do it. They have to notify his counsel and they have to let him out of custody. So this is all going to happen very quickly. They do have to notify, as I said, the judge's chambers by 5 p.m. that it has been affected, but he's out. And I think this is a fantastic development in this case. I'll be very interested to see what, if any, kinds of public statements he makes at this point. Of course, he is still under criminal prosecution, so his attorneys may advise him to be quiet until that case comes to an end. But I'm just glad he's going to be back with his family. And frankly, it is just shameful what this country has done to that poor man. All right. In other news, we have to talk about the seizure of an oil tanker, a Venezuelan oil tanker that happened yesterday. So lots of people have been pointing out, again, the irony of the fact that this oil tanker was seized and boarded by U.S. forces, because it does, of course, put into stark relief the fact that they could be seizing any boat that they suspected was carrying anything if they believed that it was engaged in any illegal activity, rather than like murdering 84 fishermen like they have done so far. But again, I have to point out to you all that it's not hierarchy. It's not hypocrisy. It's hierarchy. As we have said here many, many times before, they are intent on causing suffering. And in this instance, one of the things that they are trying to do is incite a war. Now, there has been an additional development this morning that is of serious concern, which is that Putin has made a statement that he supports the Maduro regime in Venezuela, which is, of course, the administration that Trump is trying to effect regime change against and start a war with. So, big question as to what it means if we get into a war with Venezuela and Putin is on the side of Venezuela. Not that we need anything else to be afraid of, but there you go. So somebody asked me a question about what's this really all about? Why is Trump so hyped up on Venezuela? Well, it's a couple of things. Venezuela does have a series of natural resources that the U.S. would like to have access to, and not just the U.S., but like billionaires, right? Again, this would certainly be far from the first time that the United States has started a war over oil. There's also mineral reserves in Venezuela, but there's an additional layer going on here that people should be aware of. Now, we have talked on this broadcast many times before about the network cities concept that is being fronted by a number of billionaires like Peter Thiel and Mark Andreessen. This is an insanely dangerous anti-democratic concept of setting up what are essentially city nation states that are outside the jurisdiction of any actual country or government, that are run like corporations for the benefit of the super rich, with essentially slave labor on the inside and no oversight or regulation. There is already one of these network cities being built in Honduras. There is apparently also another site that is desired by the billionaires behind this in Venezuela. And so that is also a chunk of what's going on here that people should be aware of. I will also just say, though, that, there is a part of me that feels that like this is a bit of wag the dog as well. We have the Epstein files due to be released 8 days from now. The deadline for their release, depending on who's talking, but I did the counting on the calendar, is the 19th of December. Some people are saying it's the 20th. It's the 19th of December under the Epstein Files Transparency Act. And, getting into a war in advance of their release would be certainly a distraction. Okay. So I want to just suggest that it's all of these things at once. It's not one or the other. I will also just mention this morning that there has been a request by speaking of the Epstein survivors and certain Senate Democrats to conduct an investigation into whether the Epstein files have been tampered with in any way. And again, I don't know that anything's going to come out of that, but there are still a lot of moving pieces to this situation with regard to Venezuela vis-a-vis the Epstein files themselves. And I do just want to point out, many of you here on this broadcast, as am I, are old enough to remember not just the Iraq War II, post 9/11, but also the first Gulf War, all of which was conducted by the United States under Republican presidents to try to get access to natural resources like oil. All right. So this is, again, a huge chunk of what's going on here. Okay. Something that I want everybody to be aware of is that there are some very interesting developments happening in Minneapolis right now around the ICE rollout there against Somali residents. Yesterday, there was a news conference held by the chief of the Minneapolis Police Department and Jacob Frey, the mayor, with a U.S. Somali citizen who was chased, assaulted, taken into custody by ICE, notwithstanding that he had his passport on his phone, detained for 2 hours, and then dropped off in the middle of nowhere, in the middle of a snowstorm, and told he had to walk his way home. The police chief apologized on camera to this U.S. Somali citizen about what had happened to him. And this is the first time that we have seen a U.S. police force in a press conference condemning the conduct of ICE. Now, I have to remind everybody, it was the MPD that murdered George Floyd. It was the MPD that has failed to follow through on all the sort of quote unquote reforms that were supposed to take place after George Floyd's murder. So please don't mistake me as holding up the Minneapolis Police Department as some beacon of freedom and justice, because they're not. But it is remarkable that the mayor and the chief of police were at a press conference where this citizen spoke about the absolute inhumanity that was being perpetrated against Somali Americans and Somali immigrants in Minneapolis right now, that is pure racial profiling, terrorism, and torture. And again, I have to remind you all, I've said this on Blue Sky quite a bit over the last couple of days. I'm going to say it here again. If you do not know whether or not your local police force has an agreement with ICE to cooperate, and there's a part of the federal code that allows local law enforcement to sign cooperation agreements with ICE, you need to find out. Because again, ICE does not have the manpower to carry out its mass deportation plans without the assistance of local police. So again, this is a really interesting dynamic of a defiance almost by a local police force against ICE, an apology from the local police force to persecuted Americans and immigrants for the conduct of ICE in their city. This is, again, I have to say it, another chip away at the foundations of what the Trump regime is trying to do. So there is a lot of footage out there, video footage and otherwise, of ICE absolutely without any consideration of whether people are citizens, whether they're legally anything else, are moving in the direction of just simply chasing Somalis off the streets of Minneapolis, kidnapping them and throwing them in detention. So this is quite a lot. And again, one other step in this direction was that Jacob Frey also said that members of the Minneapolis Police Department would be fired if they cooperated with ICE. So again, quite a bit of a step up in local and police resistance to what ICE is trying to do through that press conference yesterday. I would encourage you to go watch it. It is a hard listen. I will just warn you all. The testimony from this particular Somali U.S. citizen is brutal. And again, I have to remind you all that you have a voice. If cooperation is happening where you live, you should be advocating to your city council or your town council or your police chief to stop cooperating with ICE. Again, this is a place where huge inroads have been made already. There's a whole town in Maine that had a cooperation agreement that was rolled back after pressure from citizens. So this is a place where your local organizing really matters a lot. Find out what's going on, advocate for an end to cooperation agreement if it exists, know what's happening in your city and your town council in this regard, because you can stop this in its tracks if there is an effort to cooperate with ICE, all right? So please, understand what's going on where you live. All right, I have to talk about a story that broke in the New York Times this morning about the Tate brothers. And we've talked about Andrew Tate and the Tate brothers here on this broadcast many, many, many times. I want to make a couple of things clear because there's a huge, I would say almost manufactured outrage about this story this morning, and it's kind of bothering me. It's bothering me because we have known about the criminal allegations against the Tate brothers in Romania, in the UK, in other locations for years now. Okay. We also have known for a very long time that after Trump took office this time, he collaborated with the Romanian government to get the Tate brothers returned to the United States. They landed in Florida. They were put under immediate investigation by DeSantis, which at the time, we talked about this on the broadcast when it happened, was kind of shocking and a sign of how bad the Tate brothers actually are. All right. So this morning in the New York Times, there's a story about how there was a phone call between Don Jr. and Barron Trump with Andrew Tate concerning trying to get the Tate brothers back to the United States. I'm just going to tell you that there's nothing in that article, I've read it, there's nothing in that article that is new. except for the fact that Don Jr. and Barron had a conversation with Andrew Tate. And I know there are some of you who would very much like this story, particularly because the allegations against Andrew Tate, trigger warning here for CSA, the allegations against Andrew Tate include that he raped a 15-year-old girl. There's a lot of you that would like to string this together with Epstein. The Tate brothers are horrific actors, but everybody has known this for years. Like, I had conversations with my own children about Andrew Tate, I want to say like 5 years ago, that if they ever came across somebody talking about him favorably, I needed to know about it right away, because he is a huge manosphere influencer. He is somebody who has been accused repeatedly of rape, sex trafficking, torture, right? None of this is new. Okay. It's not even new that the Trump regime assisted them in getting back to the United States. Literally, the only thing that is new in this piece is that Barron Trump and Don Jr. had a phone conversation with him. So anyone who is hoping that somehow this news article is going to be the thing that brings down Trump, I think is wishfully thinking for something that will bring down the regime. Is it, of course, another sign of who we're dealing with, that the president's own children were somehow engaged with two of the most notorious international sex traffickers after Jeffrey Epstein? Sure. It's news. But do I think that it's actually going to be something at this point that causes a dent? No. And let me tell you why, okay? Not just because it's already known, but because Trump himself has not been directly implicated in the conduct of the Tate brothers, all right? Unlike Epstein. That's the difference, right? We know that Epstein and Trump were friends for years. We know that Epstein and Trump flew on the same plane together. We know that Trump was at Epstein Island. We know that Trump spent lots of time with Epstein, including in the presence of victims in Epstein's residences, right? This is a very different story. And as much as I abhor the Tate brothers, Andrew Tate is a plague on young men. Let me just make it really clear. This is one reason why my children know who this person is, right? He is a horrifying international criminal, no question about it. All right. The idea that somehow the fact that Don Jr. and Barron had a phone conversation with him and the Trump regime was involved in his return, which we already knew, is not something that is going to kind of raise alarms in the base of MAGA, who, by the way, many of whom follow Andrew Tate, in the same way that the Epstein saga, for which I will remind everybody, the MAGA base was primed for Trump to release those files because of constant propaganda that the files implicated Democrats, that there was a nationwide and global cabal of child pedophiles involved in sex trafficking and drinking the blood of children. QAnon and Epstein were all linked. That is a very different scenario from what we are dealing with in this immediacy of the Tate brothers. So again, this is a point where discernment actually makes a really big difference, right? I think it's revolting that they've been given a pass. I think it's revolting that the Romanian government argued for a compromise with them at the behest of the Trump administration. Does any of it surprise me? No. Is there anything in there that struck me as particularly new? No, other than this one phone call. So again, we have to be very strategic about the battles that we pick right now. And I also, frankly, want everybody to understand that the legs that the Epstein scandal has, again, we are 8 days away from the release date, is the thing, maybe the only thing, the only scandal that has actually stuck to Trump. And we have to actually stay focused on that, right? Again, we don't know what's in the files. We know 11,000 documents in those files have been categorized as child sex abuse material. Those will be withheld on that designation based on the language of the Epstein Files Transparency Act. But they cannot redact names from any of those files on the basis of reputation. And so we're going to see in those 300,000 pages of documents how many times Trump's name appears, what other evidence might exist of him. If there are photographs of him with young girls, their identities can be redacted, but we may see photographs where their faces are blurred out. So again, stay focused on the key feature of the Epstein scandal when you're talking about what you're advocating for, all right, among many other things. Okay, that's it for today. If you like what you see here, please subscribe to this channel. Don't forget to drop me a comment after the broadcast. Also, This broadcast survives on our subscriptions on Patreon. If you like what you see here, if you want to help me pay my tech team behind the scenes, if you want this to keep going because it takes away from my day job, please go on over and become a paid subscriber for as little as $5 a month at patreon.com/resistancelive. We are running a special right now until the end of the year. 20% off subscriptions for an annual sub using the code fall 2025. You can also gift subscriptions to your friends and loved ones in the holiday season if you would care to do that. So please head on over there and do that if you haven't already. I will be here tomorrow at regular time. There will also be a bonus broadcast for Patreon subscribers only tomorrow afternoon. And I will catch you all then. All right. Thanks so much, everybody. See you then. That's our show for today, folks. Thanks so much for being here at Resistance Live. To get more out of the show, including bonus broadcasts, the answers to all your most pressing political and legal questions, and way more, head on over to patreon.com/resistancelive and become a paid subscriber. And don't forget to hit subscribe here on your favorite podcasting platform to make sure that you never miss an episode. See you next time.